In 1994, apartheid was ended in South Africa, and the legalisation and obligation of racism was erased along with it. However, the effects the racial segregation had on the South African society are absolutely still alive, affecting black people across the country to this day.
As a legacy of apartheid, the whites, who are by far the minority, they're head and shoulders above the rest.
And so joining me tonight on this sit down is Anela Sibhoko, a black South African man who grew up in a rural village.
You can value me, you can respect me, not because of the color of my skin, but because of the equal value of my intellect. No running water, none of that stuff, so and I come from a big family.
The fact that you even have to have that thought though is crazy. But treat me like a human being and treat me like we are equal now. Is that the sentiment you share?
The mom was absolutely convinced that I was the wrong bloke for her daughter.
What was that like moving then from your rural town, with your biological family to your, as you say, white family? What?
Oh no, mate. It was a massive shock to the system.
Anela, welcome on the show today, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. First of all, as I asked of all my guests during lockdown, how is lockdown? How is COVID-19? Hopefully you're staying healthy and well.
Oh God, yeah, I am. We got back to work on Sunday. The schools were meant to be reopened on yesterday, the 1st of June, because we've missed 2.5 months of our academic year. So much everybody's frustration, that's been called off because we've got about 3,500 schools, and most 80% of those schools haven't received PPEs yet. So the teachers are frustrated, the teachers are nervous, but most importantly, the kids and the parents are as equally as nervous as them. So the reason why we want to get schools started as soon as possible is because 45 to 50% of primary school kids, which is the kids between 0 and 13 years old, they depend on the school feeding scheme. So the government gives out food parcels to schools to feed kids. So 45 to 50% of our kids in South Africa require those meals. So if they're stuck at home, they're locked out for 2-3 months, starvation becomes a problem. But the rest of it, still the same. Yeah, still frustrated, still locked out. I can't even cut my hair. That's why I've got a cap. My hair is, so barbershops and hair salons are closed. Alcohol was they lifted the ban on alcohol yesterday, so everyone was out in the streets. It was like New Year's Day. But the rest, no cigarettes sold, none of that stuff, restricted travels, and etc. etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I've not actually thought too much, again, maybe ignorantly, but living in my bubble here in the UK, I've not really thought too much of what COVID-19 is like in third world countries. For people that don't know, Anela is in South Africa lives over there, is South African himself. So I think it's mental because here, you see the kids and they, as you say, you can do online classes and, okay, don't worry, stay at home. Obviously, we have poor people in England, of course, but it's on a different level in South Africa, I feel like. And, the consequences of staying at home, the consequences of COVID are far more extreme, I feel like, in South Africa. Would you say that's right? And what would you say the biggest differences are between the two?
Actually, by far, yeah. So one of the biggest dilemmas that the government, particularly the president, has been grappling with, during the lockdown is, trying to balance the importance or emphasis on lives versus livelihoods. So that's one of the biggest frustrations in South Africa, because if people are locked down, people can't go to work. I mean, the South African National Airways alone, the company retrenched about 30,000 people, because they need to keep their head above the water as well. And with the travel ban, it's not always possible for the national airline. So, I mean, if you think of 30,000 jobs lost, in just one company, and most of those people are breadwinners in their families. So trying to balance, the importance of lives, through lockdown and keeping everybody at home, versus livelihood, which means people having to go out and work and earn a living and provide for their families. So that's one of the biggest challenges we face with. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place, unfortunately, being a third world country, in the sense that you go out and work and make money and survive and keep your head above the water, or you stay at home and remain safe. So some people are saying, I'd rather die of corona, if it comes to that, rather than die of starvation and not being able to provide for my family. So that's what we're trying to work to get our heads around, particularly the government, obviously. Where do you draw the line between saving lives and saving livelihoods? And obviously our economy is in shambles at the moment. And one of the other big issues was food parcels. So again, through the money that the government, the loan that they got from the World Bank, they're trying to give out food parcels to communities, and people have to queue up and line up for kilometers on end just to get food parcel for just to survive for the week. And through all of that, people going out to get food parcels. Social distancing is not at all a priority. Obviously hygiene becomes a problem if you're in informal settlements. So there are a lot of challenges that we face with. But again, I think the first and foremost priority is balancing the importance of saving lives and the importance of livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got off to a very important, a heavy start to this conversation, because I think there are so many pressing issues at the moment, especially, as you say, in third world countries and in South Africa. What is it? And again, correct me at any point in the interview. I want to be as honest and open as I can be, because I think open dialogue is very important, and the ability to make mistakes within questions and within dialogue is important to be able to do that, because not everyone's going to say the perfect thing and ask the perfect question, because we're all learning still. And especially, someone who isn't part of a third world country, who isn't black, who is white, and who's provided all these privileges. I am sometimes, a little bit scared to ask certain things or speak about certain subjects, because I'm scared about saying the wrong thing. But I realize now, with everything that's going on, that fuck that,
let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And if I say something wrong, you go, hey, that isn't necessarily how you should say that. And then I go, okay, and then I learn, and then we move on, So I think that's very important to preface this this conversation with. But my question was, in England, often the idea that the everyday man can lose their life to things like starvation and illness is obviously it's a thing, and people contract diseases and infections, but it's not as common as I would imagine it is in a third world country. What's that like, going through day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, knowing that starvation and illness and things like that is a reality, as opposed to a thing of the imagination, really, here in England?
I think it really. First of all, let me start off. Just ticking a box. In South Africa, one of the biggest ways we try to accelerate our rate of reconciliation after apartheid. I mean, we've only been 20 plus years in democracy, and was the fact that we opened the dialogue. So we were open enough, unlike the Americans. So issues of race relations is not a taboo in South Africa at all. So we talk about it openly. So I think that really helps in trying to accelerate the process of integration and understanding, how other people think, and trying to put yourself in their shoes. So I think if we just broke down the barriers in communication, it will help us, understand different people, quicker and faster. In the same way that when homosexuality became less of a taboo, and people started talking about these things, it was quicker for society to integrate and to understand other people, in the way they should. So you don't be worried at all. In South Africa, we're very open about these things. Americans, obviously, especially a lot of liberal people, don't really want to talk about these issues because they're thorny and they're uncomfortable. So, but South Africans, we're open about it. So yeah, you're welcome to ask those things. And secondly, the issue of socio-economic situation in South Africa, I think, first of all, it really does bring things into perspective, and it really helps you understand what's important in life, and it humbles you to a certain extent, because for instance, a person like myself who's been lucky enough to have been given opportunities, to travel and observation and to grow and to grow myself professionally and personally. It has really made me aware of how different we are in the sense that how backwards we are. Yeah, I think that's a better way of putting it. But that being said, it also does make you really appreciate the little things in life. Whereas people in England or in any first world country, in as much as they would complain about petty things, for us, it's just we're just glad to have a meal, on our table, to have a roof over our heads. And one of the things you didn't touch on, actually being less of an issue for you, perhaps that's probably why you didn't touch on it, is the idea of crime. So in as much as we complain about starvation and about lack of jobs, poverty and all those kind of things, our survival instincts compared to yours in a first world country are completely different. For us, you have to be street smart from a very young age just to survive. So crime becomes a big problem and a big topic that we talk about in South Africa. So that's probably another main difference between us. So as a legacy of apartheid, it also does mean that the whites, who are by far the minority, still are socioeconomically, they're head and shoulders above the rest. So they've got access and control of the means of production. So they've got, they own the banks, they own the farms, they own the land, they own it, etc., etc. And the black people obviously make up the working class. And, with that, it means you've got an unfair advantage because you've got a head start compared to, your fellow black brethren, because, by virtue of being white, we call it white privilege in South Africa, or white monopoly capital, just by the fact that you're born white means that you're part of a very select group of people, an elite group of people, and you might not really experience the struggles of lesser men just because of the color of your skin.
So much to unpack. I think on that it's important to talk about well, firstly, actually, can you explain a little bit about who you are? Because, it's important for people to understand who Anela is, right?
Sure.
Anela basically worked at I know you through working at my school, a very privileged private school that I went to. And that's how I know privileged. You. Extremely privileged. And we'll get to all of that, right? But I think it's important for everyone to understand you, about who you are before we get to those issues, because then they can maybe relate to you, understand who you are, and then really understand where these stories and experiences really come from. So if you could tell them a little bit about who you are.
So basically, I was born in Eastern Cape, that's where Nelson Mandela comes from. Xhosa. We speak the clicky language that you guys think is quite weird. So it is quite but unfortunately, I digress. Eastern Cape is one of, I think, the second or the most poverty-stricken county. You guys call them counties. We call them provinces or states in our country. So and there's a real sort of value for academic achievement in our province, although obviously socioeconomically we're very backwards. We're the poorest province in the country. So I was born there, and I was no different. I just grew up like any other kid, and the good thing is that when you grow up in an environment where there are no haves and have-nots, and everybody is on the same level, it makes you less aware of what you don't have. So you don't really complain, you don't really worry about what you don't have, because you don't even know what you don't have, because everybody's is on the same level.
Would you say it was difficult then, or because of that it was fairly more easier to deal with?
It was easier because, in South Africa, we've got rural communities. So that's where no running water, no roads, no electricity, no cell phone signal. That's the kind of, community I was born into. Life is simple there because everybody's on the same level. No one is agitated. People, this the African proverb that says it takes a community to raise a child. We live that way because in our community, everybody in the community. And, if you were to do anything wrong, even a drunk old man, on the side of the road has got the right to reprimand you and to beat you up because they see themselves as your parent. So it only became hard once I had started to see how the other half lives. Because then, that's when I became really restless and was like, oh God, that's when I realized, that's when my eyes got opened on what I was actually missing. Whereas as a kid, you just, it felt easy because that was all we knew. Although we didn't have anything at all, in fact, compared to, to the people that are born into privilege. So, you just go to school like any other kid. You line up, you get feeding scheme from school, and that might be your only meal of the day. And you come back home, you herd cattle. Sometimes you don't go to school if one of them, if one of the sheep are missing, you have to spend the whole day or 2 days out on the field looking after that one. So it was challenging to a certain extent, but it was also it was a burden we all gladly shoulder because we're all the same, and then obviously the things that come with it, the poverty, the crime, etc., etc. So that was tough. But then fortunately for me, when I was about 15, 16, through rugby, I'd taken up rugby because, again, context in South Africa, rugby is mainly a white people's sport who are the minority in South Africa. So for black kids to even aspire to play a rugby, to pick up a rugby ball is a big deal, although we are the majority in our country. So if you look at the Springboks, we are our national team, you'll see that majority of them are still white Afrikaans because, that's what they did. And systematically back then, black South Africans weren't allowed by law. It was illegal for black people to play rugby because it was an elitist sport. Only now do we have a few black people representing our national team in rugby. That's why it's such a big deal. It was such a big deal last year at the Rugby World Cup when Siya Kolisi was made the first black Springbok captain, and he actually won the World Cup. And guess who we beat? England. So 30-12. Need I say more? So it was a bit of a big a leap for me to even take up rugby, to play rugby, because again it was mainly a white person sport. And then when I was 15, 16, through less of talent, I'd say more I just played it with such a consuming passion that always exceeded my limited talent, and somebody believed in me, and they gave me an opportunity to go to a private school when I was 17. So that was probably a turning point in my life. That was a big transformation, because I went from a position where I didn't speak any English into a predominant white school. I think there were only 6 black kids in my class. And it was a private school, so it was a big jump for me, and it got so frustrating at times when I got there, because I was very different. I was an outsider. I barely spoke English, and etc., etc. And the kids look at you differently. But for me, one of the things that was frustrating was the fact that the white kids, they put an arm around me and they supported me through that struggle, and when I was learning English, etc. But the black kids, they just couldn't stand me because they were different. You know what I mean? So they were born into privilege. They had access to private schools. Their parents were rich. And I was just this outsider coming in who didn't speak English. And they felt embarrassed about me in a way. So when I finished in high school, I was a year older than the rest of the kids, because when I started off, they made me repeat the same grade just to catch up and be on the same academic level as the rest of the kids. So that was a bit of a challenge, but through rugby again, I quickly settled in, and I quickly found my feet, and slowly people began to warm up to me and saw me in a different way, because I had something they didn't have, and I represented what they wished they could have, and that was the ability on a rugby field. So that was a bit of an escape and a platform that I used as a stepping stone to extend an open hand, to the people that didn't really understand me, instead of extending a clenched fist. So rugby really was a big outlet. And I mean, now in South Africa, we've got so many black kids, wanting to play rugby because they see what our national team is doing. They see what people like Siya Kolisi are doing. And obviously, the legacy of Nelson Mandela, being a big fan of rugby himself. So things are changing, and then on the academic front, again, starting off with very little command of the language of instruction, which are English. It was rocky at first, but as soon as I got a bit of understanding of English, then I really did pride myself in my ability to sit still and my ability to work hard, because I wanted to use my academic achievement to show the people that really didn't see eye to eye with me that you can value me, you can respect me, not because of the color of my skin, but because of the equal value of my intellect. If you can't respect me because I'm black, but at least you can respect me because I get good enough grades in class, and I can learn when I want to. I can be smart. I can be intellectual. You know what I mean? So I use that again as a way of showing people that even if you don't respect me or like me because of how I look like, but at least you need to respect me for the equal value of my intellect.
The fact that you even have to have that thought, though, is crazy. Like, the fact that you even had to think these people, I'm going to have to work harder on my own intellect and my own ability and my own education in order to earn the respect of these people because of the color of my skin. That process, that thought process, that in itself is mental, isn't it?
It's quite interesting to try and explain it to somebody who doesn't live in South Africa, who doesn't have the context, because obviously I've lived in England for a while, and you guys don't have these kind of problems. Whereas in South Africa, the problem is the fact that because our parents, and our democracy is still relatively young, 25 years into democracy, so our parents are still alive, and our parents went through that time where things were rough and things were different. And so now the problem becomes the indoctrination that the young generation gets from their parents. So our parents, they pass down their ideas and their sentiments down to us. And by the time you're 6, 8, 10 years old, you already know that I shouldn't like that person because of A, B, and C. Because mom said I shouldn't like them, or dad said I shouldn't play with them, etc., etc. So the indoctrination that comes from parents and those ideas being passed down through the generations, that's why it makes it difficult for us as a society to move on and to make So now even the young guys, the young generation, they still harbor some of the sentiments that their parents have because of the conversations they have around the dinner table. So by the time you get to school, by the time you're 16, 18, 20, you already believe what mom and dad taught you because mom and dad are always right? So that's why you have to really try and work hard to show and prove that you are worthy, that you're good enough, that you're good enough to play rugby, you're good enough to be an A student, you're good enough to to be accepted and be valued for what you can contribute, rather than for people to feel sorry for you because you look a certain way, or you come from a certain home, or you speak a certain language.
On that, is that how does that feel? So especially with everything that's happening at the moment, but especially in general, if I was to feel, oh, I'm sorry that you had to go through these things because I really am. How does that feel? Is that like, no, hang on, stop treating me like, stop patronizing me, stop feeling sorry for me. Okay, listen, that was all shit, but treat me like a human being and treat me like we are equal now. How is that the sentiment you share?
Absolutely. No, nobody wants to get handouts. You know what I mean? Like we're not asking that you give us handouts. Just give us an opportunity to prove ourselves. Just because I'm a black kid doesn't mean I can't play rugby. Doesn't mean I can't be, a doctor. My brother's a doctor, by the way. Doesn't mean I can't be a doctor. Just give me an opportunity, and I'll prove that I'm good enough. So don't feel sorry for me. Just change. And at the moment, you spoke about what's happening in America. That's what black people are asking for. They're crying out for that. They say, don't feel sorry for us. Just give us opportunity and see what we can do. We'll soar. We'll show you. Black Americans, their contributions in the arts, not just in America, but worldwide, in music and film, in politics, people like Barack Obama. And, so they really are good enough to be contributing members of society. But it should never come from a position of sympathy. It should come from a position of understanding that you and I are equal, not because you're white and I'm black. No, we're equal because, we're both human beings, and we each deserve to be treated the same way. So don't feel sorry for me. You know what I mean? In the same way that even disabled people don't like it when you feel sorry for them. You know what I mean? Just treat them like a normal human being. So, and I think that's what people are crying out for at the moment, black people in particular, is that don't patronize us like that. You know what I mean? Like we're not disabled. It's not like we can't do anything for ourselves. We can do stuff for ourselves, but just give us opportunity. Give us a shot. Give us a foothold in the economy. Give us, a foothold into getting to that university, that will propel me to great heights. You look at, the life of a person like Barack Obama, who, in my opinion, was a phenomenal leader. That's all he ever wanted, is just give me a shot, give me an opportunity, and I can prove to you. And he went on to achieve high honors. So it can be patronizing at times when people come from that point of view where they feel sorry for you. I always say that, if you were looking at your white mate, would you respond in the same way? Would you have the same approach? If not, then that's wrong. So you should approach me in the same way that you approach your white mates. And you should never be shy of making jokes with me because you think, oh, that might be a sensitive subject, or no, that's absolute nonsense. And I mean, you look in America, in hip hop in particular, they've taken the discomfort out of the N word, most of American rappers, and they throw it around everywhere. In South Africa, we've got, actually in Durban, where I live, the Sharks, who are the main rugby team here, they've started the campaign, they call it I See Color, hashtag I See Color. And I love that, because we often, because especially white people, in their quest to not come across as racist, they say I'm colorblind. I don't see color. I don't, you know what I mean? No, I want you to see color. Acknowledge that I'm different, but you need to celebrate my difference in the same way that you think yours is important. So the Sharks have started that campaign, and people are, they go around saying I see color. But I acknowledge you for who you are. I respect you for who you are. And we're such a diverse country in South Africa. We're really lucky. I mean, we've got 11 official languages alone in our country. So, so the diversity we find is a strength for us as a country. And we are affectionately known as the Rainbow Nation. So, yeah, people don't want to be patronized like that. Approach them the same way you would approach a white mate. Just give them opportunity. Society, give them opportunity. Treat them like equals. Don't treat them like dogs where you just kill them off for absolutely no reason.
You mentioned, give black people and people of color opportunity. Just that's all you want, the same opportunity. From your experience, what sort of experiences have you had where you feel like you've been denied opportunity, or people, black people around you have been denied opportunity?
God. Again, coming from someone who really did enjoy rugby, I think in South Africa, other than the wealth and the good socio-economic status that most Afrikaans people or white people in your perspective, have, is their love for rugby and how they try to make that a monopoly, a cartel type of thing. They run it like it's a cartel. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out, particularly black people. So to be a black person and to try to get into that, to break into that cartel or that monopoly, becomes really difficult. So in that sense, I mean, you go throughout the age group levels, knowing that you'll have to be 10 times better, than your white opponent, just because you're black, and you have to try to push the odds so much, because the odds are stacked against you, and you're going to have to be exceptional. You have to work twice as hard just to be seen, just to be recognized, just to be treated like an equal. So in that sense, it was difficult, especially growing up. Whereas now I'm sort of a bit older. I understand life. I understand society. I've been given opportunities, and I've been lucky in that way. But it's not all doom and gloom. We do have a lot of very good white South Africans who are also as passionate about reconciliation and transformation as we are. So again, blacks being the majority by far in South Africa, about 80+%. So a lot of white people now are also extending an open hand instead of a clenched fist, and they're saying, what, we're going to put an arm around you, we're going to give you an opportunity, we're going to believe in you. And I was really fortunate to be one of those kids who was given a similar opportunity through the scholarship that I got to a private school, just to improve myself, but also the family that I got to live with when I was there. So when I got to the private school, I met a white mate, and he said, what, bro, I see the situation back home. Why don't you come live with us? And I've lived with them ever since. So that really accelerated my rate of integration and my rate of of becoming westernized or being polished. The fact that I lived with a white family. So that was nice. I only went home to Eastern Cape or only during school holidays. So I lived with them ever since, and I actually still visit them often as well, even today. So in that sense, it was not all bad. I did get an opportunity to go to a private school. I did go to a predominantly white school, very privileged. I did get an opportunity to live with a white family, a family that they are exactly that to me. They are family. So in that way, I have seen, the different side of what we can achieve in society if people would just put away, their differences, and if people would see each other as equals. And I think, the mercy that and the opportunity that my white family gave me was really influential in helping me to see the world in a different way.
Yeah, what was that like moving then from your rural town, with your biological family to your, as you say, white family? What?
Oh no, mate. It was a massive shock to the system. Big,
Yeah, what
big,
was that
big shock
like?
to the system because, like I said, where I come from at home, we've only used candles. I went through my whole primary schooling career, using candles at home, and if the candle goes out, that's it. You're done for the night. You can't even study. No running water, none of that stuff. So and I come from a big family. My dad is a very fertile bloke, so got a lot of siblings. I'm one of 10.
Good swimmers,
yeah,
good swimmers.
Yeah. No, they made it. All healthy and fit. So yeah, I'm one of 10, and I'm the ninth one. So it was a big struggle. So to go to a white community and to live with a white family, to go to white school, oh my God, it was so big for me because besides not being able to speak the language, the lifestyle was different. The kids, they didn't value anything because for them it came easy and they came from rich homes, and whereas for me, even the little I got was like manna coming down from heaven. So simple things like that, walking into a restaurant and not having good table manners because I've never used a fork and a knife. I've always used a spoon for everything. So things like that, and how to conduct yourself in public, and how to understand people, and how to have conversations with people, and using a shower. That was my favorite. A shower was my favorite. I love showers to this day. I love showers to this day. Just water coming down from anyway. So little things like that were huge for me. The food as well. Oh my God. Like the different food. Okay, Tonbridge is by far the best I've ever been to in terms of food. But the difference in food was also massive. Like how just, oh God, how different the food is, and how much better how nutritious it is compared to what I used to eat back home. So little things like that, food, shower, TV. Yeah, never had TV growing up. No electricity, no running water. Having to be driven to school rather than have to walk to school, was also another big shock to the system. So that was nice. And then playing rugby at a much higher level, and having to travel with your mates, and that year was huge for me, mate. It was massive.
Was it a bit overwhelming at the beginning? Did you have to take maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month to go, oh, this is a bit mental. Can we all calm down here a little bit? Or did you take to it straight away?
I would make a comparison to Tonbridge. After I just finished my final year of high school, I went straight to Tonbridge. And I arrived.
Tonbridge, by the way, is the private school that I went to and Anela worked at.
Yeah, so I arrived there in a very, very cold and grey winter's morning. It was January 3rd when I got to Tonbridge. And I just finished writing my final exam. So that step up, I think, in my view, prepared me for the next step up, which was going to Tonbridge. So I wasn't, Tonbridge was less of although it was a shock to the system to see the opportunity and the vast amount of wealth and the privilege. But I was prepared. I was prepared because I'd had a similar opportunity, a similar experience 3 years prior. So yes, it did get overwhelming. But I'll tell you a story that was, I never tell anyone this story. When I got to Creston, the very first day, we call it orientation day. So all the new kids to our school, they get, spend a whole day being orientated around the school and all those things. So in my orientation day, I met this girl. She was white, Afrikaans. So that made things worse. And within a few weeks of me being at Creston, we started dating. So that really did also help in trying to accelerate the process of integration into that new environment. So having a white Afrikaans, blonde, blue-eyed, girlfriend was also huge. And that's one of the things I never understood was how, what she saw in me. I was like, oh God, I'm just this black kid who people don't really, see in that way. But she stuck with me. Yeah. She stuck with me for the whole year. And then when the rugby season came, it turned out that her belief and her faith in me would pay off, because now even other girls would start noticing, it was really a good experience to have her on my side, because she also helped me accelerate that process of transition and integration So it was extremely overwhelming. And because I was given a foundation scholarship, so a few parents within the school were paying my school fees. So after each quarter, I would have to go to them and to report to them about my academic progress for that quarter. So in South Africa, our academic year runs from January to December, and it's broken into quarters: January to March, April to June, etc. So the first quarter, January to March, in the East, I had to report to my sponsors with my school report, and that wasn't fun. Because I was sitting in this boardroom, in this really, really, amazing company, and I've got all these board members in the company asking me why my maths grade is not good enough, and I'm like, guys, are you serious? But they really did hold me accountable because they were funding my education. So that was really another experience that I wasn't really prepared for, because to be held accountable like that, and for them again not to feel sorry for me that I had come from a completely different world, and they just really they had such a high standard, and they wanted me to reach that standard because I believe they believed in me. So that was really nice to have them really say, you know what, you're better than this. Come on, just don't feel sorry for yourself. Knuckle down, work harder. And every single quarter, you're going to have to report to us. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to show us your report. So that was really overwhelming.
You said that you got the girlfriend, the white Afrikaans girlfriend, and that a lot of the white kids in the school actually put their arm around you and were really supportive. With the girlfriend, did you ever have an issue? In general, when the boyfriends meet the girlfriend's dad in general life, that's a scary process. But I can't imagine being a black rural kid going to a white private school whose fathers and their parents' generation were probably a part of that apartheid generation. What was that process like? Did you have any issues there?
It's so funny how you are hitting all the right spots, and so yes, I did. I don't really tell the story because it wasn't really nice. So I spent that year, my first year at the school. It was also her first year as well. So and then obviously, the inevitable has to happen. The moms and the dads, you have to meet them, and so it became apparent during the year that her dad actually was Portuguese and her mom was Afrikaans. So her dad was fine, because he's Portuguese. European, they don't really have much of a problem, but the mom was really, really against it. So she really, she put her foot down, her mom, and was like, this can't happen. It's not good for the image of our family. It's not good for you. You can't trust this guy, etc., etc. But fortunately for me, at that time, my girlfriend, she was really, strong, and she said, you know what, I like this bloke. If you can't be happy for me, when I'm happy, then. And then eventually her mom kicked her out. So her mom kicked her out, and she went to live with her grandmother at the time. And me, being the weakling that I was, I actually suggested to her that, you know what, let's call it off if it means you risking or jeopardizing your relationship with your mom and your family, and breaking your family apart. So she spent a few weeks with her grandmother because she just wouldn't change and she wouldn't conform to her mom's standards. And the mom, towards the end of the year, eventually she was like, you know what, okay, it's fine. Let's invite him to our home and let's see what this guy's about. And I remember that day, it was towards the end of October, which is towards the end of the academic year in South Africa, and it was the Currie Cup final. It was the final of the domestic competition in rugby, similar to the Premiership in your country. So after the final of the Currie Cup, the Sharks, who I support, they won that final, and then I had to to take a taxi to her home to meet her parents that evening. So, we spent hours in the family, had dinner with the parents. I thought I made a good impression, only to find out that on the Monday, that was a Saturday night, only to find out on the Monday morning, the mom was absolutely convinced that I was the wrong bloke for her daughter. So because she knew her daughter wouldn't change her mind, she then eventually pulled her out of our school at the end of that academic year. And then the next year, she went to a different school. So that's how, it was short-lived. It was only for 1 year, but that 1 year was crucial for me because it really did help me integrate into society and for most people to see me differently. Although for her, it jeopardized her relationship with her family, and eventually she had to be pulled out from the school she really loved to go to a different school because of me. That wasn't nice.
That's not nice listening to it, let alone experiencing it. This might seem like an obvious question, but how did that make you feel?
Yeah, but I would think because I saw it coming, and because I wasn't naive enough I wasn't naive at all, in fact, to believe that what we felt for each other was was something that was normal or something that was acceptable in our society. So I wasn't naive to think that way. So I always knew it was going to come, but it was just a matter of when. So when this when during the year, when the mom, those episodes when she would take her phone away and ground her and kick her out for a few weeks, and she would go and stay with her grandmother for a couple of weeks, and then during that time I always knew that was a build up to something bigger, and eventually it was just a ticking time bomb. So I was really sad, and because I was still 16, 17, and I really had a lot of unanswered questions, similarly to the questions that we have at the moment with the police brutality in America. Just questions around the fact that, like, how, just why does it matter that I'm black and I'm dating your daughter? Like, it was just those kind of questions. Although you never get answers to those questions, and in a similar fashion that Americans, the Black Americans in particular, at the moment are asking the same question with the law enforcement agents in America. It's like, why? Just why are you killing us? Just because, So I also had those questions. It's like, why won't you accept me just because my skin is slightly darker than yours, and perhaps my socioeconomic standing isn't as good as you would want for your daughter's boyfriend, and and all of those kind of things. Also the idea of what kind of family you come from, your socioeconomic standing, what kind of jobs do your parents have, what kind of car does your mom drive, etc. When you can't tick those boxes, then all the parents see are red flags. So it was really frustrating, and it did take a while for me to reconcile the fact that actually, in as much as the more things have changed, the more things have stayed the same.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, basically what I mean is that things have changed in the sense that again, I'm going to speak from a South African context. So Black South Africans, our demographics, we're the majority, and through Nelson Mandela, etc., freedom fighters, we got our independence, and we got the democracy in 1994. So majority of our leaders, political leaders, are black, and including our presidents, etc. And our majority of our society, in terms of population size, are black. So things have changed in that sense, and racism in South Africa prior to 1994 was legal. It was law. You know what I mean? It was law that you can't sit on the same bench as a white folk. You can't jump in the same bus as a white folk. You can't go to the same school as a white folk. You can't play the same sport. You know what I mean? It was law back then. And if you broke the law, you were either beaten to death, tortured, thrown in prison. I mean, the history. So prior to 1994 in South Africa, racism was law. It was in the constitution. And then after that, we got the democracy, and things did change in that sense that racism was no longer law. You could go to the same school with a white folk. You weren't. It wasn't illegal to do so, although there was systemic racism in the sense that they would prop up so many barriers for you that you won't be able to have access to those places, to those institutions, to those sports, etc., etc. So things did change in that front, and the fact that black people now slowly are becoming more financially independent in South Africa. They've got good jobs. They've got access to relatively good education compared to what the Bantu education that we had prior to 1994. We've got black government predominantly. We can speak the same languages. We can play the same sports. So things have changed in that front. And we celebrate that, and we welcome that, and black people can vote and run for office, etc. We welcome that, and we celebrate that. So things have changed in that front, in the sense that racism is no longer made legal by law. But things haven't changed in the sense that people's minds and people's beliefs and the vile stereotypes that our parents passed down to us, those still exist in our society. So things haven't changed in that way. Secondly, similarly, we always blame the white folks. But as a black person, I'll take it upon myself to say that we are also to blame, because we don't think we are good enough to be seen as equals as white folks. It's called the inferiority complex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you've been oppressed for so many years, you begin to believe that you are inferior. So the inferiority complex that we have and that we harbor makes us feel as second-class citizens when we're in the company of white people. So that can't be good. So if we it's on us now to get over that mentality, to get over the poverty mindset, to understand that things have changed, and it's up to us to get a foothold in the economy, to get a foothold in education and jobs, etc., and to understand that whatever aspirations we might have, it is possible now to achieve them. So to get over the inferiority complex, to understand that now we do have access to most of the things that our parents would only dream of. So it's up to us to take that leap, and it's up to us to make that our ambitions and dreams become a reality.
Yeah, would you say there was and I would not blame any black person for especially in your situation for this, but would you say there was maybe a resentment towards the white people, amongst your obviously in your parents, obviously, because they went through legally. They were legal, but you still now feel the rough end of those times. Would you say there is a resentment towards the white people from people of color?
Oh, it's huge, mate. It's really massive. And again, the reason for the resentment is got less to do with the actual history of our country. It's got everything to do with the economic inequality.
Yeah,
you understand that? So now it's like so frustrating to know that you're black, but that there's a glass ceiling that you can't go past. You know what I mean? Because you're black, and because you for so many years you started from a deep muddy abyss, whereas a white kid your age started head and shoulders above you. So that resentment comes from the economic inequality, the fact that we see that white folks, although they are the minority by far in our country, still own by far probably most of our economy. They've got means of production. They are the ones that are entrepreneurs. They own the land. They have the farms. They own the banks. They own the schools. They own this and that. And so that economic inequality becomes a great source of unrest. And we've got a very left-wing politician in our country. He's called Julius Malema, and he started his own movement called the Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa. So it's very controversial, but he advocates for black South Africans to expropriate the land that was taken by the white folks forcefully, and the fact that black people were forcefully displaced back in apartheid days. And the white folks took all the good land, all the arable, the good land they could have, and they own most of the land in our country anyway. So he says we need to expropriate the land without any compensation. So he gives he suggests that black people have to go and get the land back without having to pay for the land, and to be able to have access to land, to raise crops and to have livestock and to build properties, etc. So, but he is very controversial in our country, and but that idea of economic inequality becomes a big talking issue, and that's what makes people really, really restless. And unfortunately, we've seen so many episodes of spikes in our society of hate crimes, because black people would kill a farmer because he's oppressing them, or they would kill a white person because they envy, because of envy. Envy is something that will always be there. So the envy is a hot topic in our country, and the socio-economic inequality becomes a real issue of resentment. And people were sold a dream by Nelson Mandela 25 years ago that 20 years later, which is probably now, we would be in a very, very different space economically. But the fact that we haven't seen the golden dream that was sold to us, that makes people really frustrated, because that was part of Nelson Mandela's stance. He said he doesn't want us to avenge the horror, the horrific acts that and the things that were done by white people prior to democracy. He wanted us to reconcile as a country and to move forward because it was good for everybody. But now people are like, you know what? We should have kicked these people out because they still own everything. They still have the means, and we just slaving by, and we just maids, and we garden boys, and we the drivers, and we the farm workers, whereas we don't own anything, So we the working class people. So that really frustrates people.
Why do you think we haven't seen that? A dream is rarely made true, right? But why do you think we haven't seen at least close to that dream materialize, even though it has got better?
Well, mate, you just have to look at the situation that, the fact that 25 years after we got our independence, we celebrate having the first ever black captain of our national rugby team. 25 years later, it's a big deal for us. I mean, thousands of people were in the streets celebrating because guess what? We made it. We've got a black captain captaining the Springboks. You know what I mean? And through that inspiration, obviously he's a good guy. He went on to win the Rugby World Cup. So, and that was a big deal in South Africa. I mean, God, the kids, they started dreaming. They started believing that, you know what? Maybe the dream can be attainable. Because if that guy can do it, and I don't know if you know his story, Siya Kolisi's story is very interesting. He literally came from nothing, like literally nothing at all. So, and today he's the first black Springbok captain, and he won the World Cup. So, now people are saying, you know what, we might have, although we've got one person or two people that we can look up to, maybe it's possible. Maybe if that guy can can achieve high honors as a black man, maybe we too can achieve that. But again, the dream, unfortunately, for most people will never become a reality. Well, at least not now, maybe in 20, 30 years time, hopefully. But I think the reason why we haven't got to where we could have gotten to, and obviously Nelson Mandela's ideal is because when we got our independence, nothing was given back to the black people. You know what I mean? So we won freedom, but freedom was only the fact that we can vote and we can elect our own leaders. That was the freedom we got. But
the playing field wasn't made level, was
exactly. So now the people that were in an advantaged position during so many years of apartheid, they're head and shoulders, they're miles ahead of everybody else. You know what I mean? So and the people that didn't have those opportunities, they have to try and work themselves out of a very dark hole just to break even. So that's why we haven't reached the dream yet. And the biggest problem, in fact, apartheid was a masterclass system in oppressing people. I don't know who came up with that idea, but it was phenomenal. I think it is genius. So what they did, it was not only just the separation of people based on race, it was also the quality of the education that the majority black folk would receive. So they called it Bantu Education. Bantu is an African word for people, the people. Mm-hmm. So Bantu Education meant that black people had a different syllabus to a white kid. Understand that? You know what I mean? So you could be both 16 years old, but you learn different things at school. So all you can ever get through Bantu Education, you could either become a policeman, you can either become like a cook or a driver, etc., you know what I mean? But you could never become a lawyer or doctor or accountant or, you know what I mean, or a politician, and you can never really aspire to be anything other than the bare minimum that you can be. So Bantu Education was really, really a backward system that was used for so many years. That's why our parents, look at us and they're amazed in the fact that we are computer literate. You know what I mean? Simple things like that. Like, they're like, oh my God, my son can use a computer. And that's a big deal because they didn't have that, So because they went through the Bantu Education, whereas the white folks, they had a different curriculum. Actually, they used the Cambridge system. Yeah, because obviously we were colonized by Great Britain, many years ago. So they used the Cambridge system and we were stuck with the Bantu Education. So if you can get people in the area of education, if you can stifle them, you've won the battle. The battle is half won. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because through education is a gateway to independence. If people know more, then they will demand more because they know they deserve better. But if people don't know any better, there's no way that those people will even try because they don't know any better.
A bit like when you saw the wider world from your little rural town, you saw that, okay, no, he's got a shower, he's got lovely, do you know what I mean? All these things. So then you started to, because you saw that, and in a way that was an education, you started to then desire and work and expect more from people around you. I presume, hopefully I'm hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah, absolutely. It really broadens your horizon. So now, what they did, and it was by law. It was law that you wouldn't go to this school. You would only go to that school, and you can only aspire to be this, to this a career. So people didn't really have a broader perspective. That's why we had so few people like Nelson Mandela who came from a royal home, a traditional royal family, in our Xhosa community in Eastern Cape. So he was meant to be the chief of the community, through the line of his birth. But he went to a good school. He was a very bright student. He studied law, obviously in an exclusive black, only black, school and university. And then after that, he met his friend Oliver Tambo. Actually, our national airport in Johannesburg is called O.R. Tambo. It is named after him. His mate Oliver Tambo. Actually, my street is named after his wife, Adelaide Tambo. So it's funny. So our international airport is named after Oliver Tambo. So Nelson Mandela met his mate, Oliver Tambo. They're both from Eastern Cape. And these guys were like, you know what? I studied law at, it's called Forte University. They both studied law. And then, iron sharpens iron. Those guys started an exclusively black law firm. Just the two of them. And they most of the work they did was based on racial disputes between white employers and black employees. And then after that, Nelson Mandela decided with Oliver Tambo that, what, we are inundated with grievances from black folks complaining about their white employers, and we as the only black lawyers in Johannesburg at the time, they had to try and fight cases for those people and represent those people. So that's when his political career was launched, because again, he had a different perspective because of the education that he got. Whereas 99.9% of the population didn't know any better, No. But the few people like Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo, the people that did go to good schools and did get a good education, although it was only black schools, and did get, professional careers like being a lawyer, although you only represented black people, that was a springboard to launching their political careers. That's when they decided, what, something's got to give, something's got to change in our country. So they didn't start off as politicians. They started off as just lawyers, just living normal lives. And then from that, Nelson Mandela, says what launched his political career was not a single, moment. It was not an epiphany, but it was an accumulation of 1,000 slights, 1,000 indignities, and 1,000 unremembered moments. That's what forced him. That's what caused his proud rebelliousness. For him to stand up and speak up on behalf of the black people.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there education being, I think I've picked up every single time we've been talking about racism and the problems within that, it's come back to education. So, that makes me think that education is, if it's at the forefront of the reason as for why racism is there, and because of the lack of education, the way we can get out of racism is probably through education then, right? Improve that education. What do you think the education systems in South Africa and across the world can do to really level out the playing field, as you say, and get rid of this fucking stupid racism, man?
I like to call these kind of topics hot topics because there is no absolute truth. We know that, things are either black and white or things are either right and wrong. I mean, you just have to look at our the way we treat Muslim people, particularly Arabs from the Middle East, and the stereotypes that go with those people. The way we view Jews, the way we look at homosexual people, etc., etc. So those topics are hot topics because you either disagree or you agree. You either for or against. That's why it becomes very difficult to, again, Nelson Mandela, he was so eloquent. I like to quote Nelson Mandela because, he was really eloquent. And, he said, teach people to love because love comes more naturally to the human soul and the human heart than its opposite. You know what I mean? So he says people need to be taught to love, because if you can teach them to hate, which is currently what's happening, because you get taught to hate. When you're born as a young baby, you're born as a blank slate. Someone has to plant a seed of hate in you that makes you begin to see different people in a different way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You've never seen like a toddler in a playground look at someone,
Never.
a black kid, and go, I'm not playing with you because you're black. It only happens when you're older, and the parents go, don't play with him because he's black, and they go, oh, okay, I won't play with him because you know what I mean?
Exactly. And the thousands of moments where you sit around a dinner table and mom and dad rant off and start off and pass down and indoctrinate you with their own stereotypes, with their own the ideas that they harbor in their hearts, and how they don't see people of color in an equal way that they see themselves. So if people can be taught to hate, Nelson Mandela says people can also be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite, and I believe that is true. So what we can do maybe in the area of education is to teach people that just because my skin color is different to yours doesn't mean that we different in who we are as humanity. You know what I mean? Like we there's a word in South Africa, it's called Ubuntu, and basically it's the idea of the notion that we achieve ourselves by sharing ourselves with others and caring for those around us, and it's just the notion that there's this unbreakable umbilical cord that connects you to me and me to you, vice versa. So but until such time that we are taught these things, until such time that we are taught that for me to thrive and for me to live life in its fullest form, in its abundant form, I need to see you as an equal. I need to value your life in the same way that I value mine, because I achieve myself by sharing myself with you and caring for you. I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, and that's what we believe in the African society. It takes a village to raise a child. It doesn't matter whose child it is. I was
going to say, like in your community when you were a kid.
Exactly. So it takes a village to raise a child. It doesn't matter whose child it is. If that child is starving, it is my obligation to look after them. If their parents pass away because they've been, who their lives have been cut short by HIV and AIDS, which is a reality in our country. You know what I mean? It's up to us. It's, the onus is on us to look after those kids, those orphans, because it takes a village to raise a child. And so I think we need to be taught to love. You know what I mean? We need to be taught that, again, black people as well can be helped to overcome the inferiority complex that we have as well as a race. We always, most of us black people, we believe that we second-class citizens compared to white folks because, well, we inferior. I mean, they've told us that 1,000 times, and you just have to look at who owns what to know that other people are haves and other people are have-nots. Once we overcome that, and once, our curriculum is made in a way that makes people realize that we're all equal, particularly history. If you look at our history books in all continents, not just in Africa or in America, I mean Europe, UK, in all continents, history is written by the victors, by the people who won. You know what I mean? So look at the American, the history of Black Americans, and the slavery that they went through for hundreds of years, and it took the sacrifice and the courage of, again, a white bloke, Abraham Lincoln, who was the president at the time, to put his foot down and say, you know what, I'm willing to risk my life. In fact, he actually was assassinated for his beliefs. But imagine assassinating a president because he says we need to abolish slavery. We need to see these guys as equals. They've got hands and feet and two eyes like we do. Their blood is the same as our blood. And, he had to pay a really hefty price for his courage and his sacrifice. But I'm sure Abraham Lincoln, was probably appalled at the moment by what's happening in America and the sacrifice that is made. And people like, again, assassinated for the same reason, Martin Luther King Jr. So many people paid a price. You look at South Africa, our history with apartheid, people like Nelson Mandela being in prison for 27 years. Imagine being thrown on an island prison on Robben Island, off the coast of Cape Town, just because you're fighting for the equal rights of people of color. How insane is that? 27 years of imprisonment, 27 years of not seeing your family, not seeing your kids.
You can kill someone and get less than that.
It's insane. So but the price they paid, and the sacrifice they made, the current affairs and the current events, they laughing in the face of those people's sacrifice.
Funnily enough, the policeman who killed George Floyd will probably get less than 27 years, right? Because and that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's really crazy in that if you look at it from that point of view.
What do you make of what's going on in America then at the moment? Because America is typically seen as, this the American dream, the forward-thinking country. Everyone's behind America, it feels like. But now it's being exposed, and I think it's really being exposed to the masses now. But it was always there to the people who suffered from it at the time, that actually it's backwards. It's backwards in the way it runs. What do you make of what's going on there with George Floyd and things like that?
Man, it's again, Americans love their guns, don't they? They love their right to bear arms, and I think probably that's one of the sources. Secondly, you look at the backlash from the predominantly again, America is by far predominantly white country, who also has a history of racial segregation. So through their slavery, etc. So those things never really go away. We just change laws. We just stop making it law. We just stop making slavery legal. We stop making apartheid legal. We change the laws, but we don't change people's minds. You know what I mean? So if you think about it that way, in the same way that we made it legal for same-sex marriage, but we didn't change people's minds. If you believe that people shouldn't marry because they're the same sex, you won't change your mind because Boris Johnson said it was legal. You know what I mean? Legal, just because something is made legal doesn't mean people change what they think about it. So that's one of the biggest problems in America, is that slavery was abolished hundreds of years ago, but people's minds haven't been changed. The way they see others, the way they see, people of color or minorities in America is still the same way. And again, those ideas are passed down through generations. And when you read the history books, like I said, our history, the history needs to be told in a different way, because history is only one-dimensional. You don't tell history based on, the slave's point of view. You only tell the history based on the master's point of view. And so history can, be diluted a bit. So when you look at the history, I think people need to start realizing that actually we need to overcome this by changing our minds. That's why it's so frustrating for me to see, President Obama was, he was in office for 2 terms, and the backlash after that, is what led them to electing Donald Trump, because they just couldn't stand, having someone who thought like him, like Barack Obama. He's very liberal. He's very, progressive in his ideas. So if a lot of
that bloody progression,
exactly.
What a nightmare!
Yeah.
Jesus Christ!
So people just wouldn't have that. And when Donald Trump came out and said, you know what, deport the Mexicans, build a wall, this and that, etc. People started being riled up, and the emotions kicked in, and people realized, you know what, this is the guy that we believe in. This is the guy that's going to bring back, the America of old, the America that only looked after the interests of the majority, which are the white people. Because people feel threatened when black people start to do something with their lives, to become progressive, to get an education, to get a good job, and to run for office. People become threatened about that. Like, oh, these black people are uprising, and these black people are, are even presidents now. So we need to do something about that.
And also, they might replace my position.
That's the thing.
They might think, we don't want you guys rising up. Keep the jobs with us white people.
Stay there in the ghettos. Stay in the ghettos. Stay there and smoke the weed and drop out of school and shoot each other in the gang violence and do hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, just stay there. Don't come up here. Don't come to Harvard. Don't come to the White House. You threaten us. So that, I think that is something that needs to be done by changing people's minds. But it doesn't help, because people like Donald Trump, he probably harbors the same sentiments as the people that are perpetrators. So it doesn't help if you look at it from that point of view. Secondly, people, particularly white people, it's on them. In as much as when we complain about violent and extreme Muslim extremists, we call out Muslims, the real Muslims, to do something about it. it's not enough for us to say, Muslim extremists are bad and they shouldn't be bombing, trains and buses and schools and hospitals. It's up to the Muslim community to stand up and say, you know what, this is not the right thing. This is not a true reflection of the religion that we believe in. In the same way that white people at the moment, they need to be standing up and saying, you know what, this is not what we stand for. Call those guys out. Show solidarity with the black community. And if they started doing that, I mean, social media is a big tool at the moment. It's a really effective weapon and effective tool of showing solidarity with people. I mean, the story of Ahmed Arbery, who was gunned down just by jogging in a Georgia neighborhood. I mean, God, George Floyd just being killed just because, his $20 note bounced and he got killed. So, white people need to take a stand in the same way that when we talk about gender-based violence, we want men rather to stand up and call other men out and say, you know what, bro, we don't stand for that. We don't oppress women. We don't abuse women. We don't, you know what I mean? So it's up to the people because I tell you this, if you don't say anything, you're part of the problem. If you quiet, that means you agree. It implies that you support something. If you don't call me out when I'm being racist, that means you support what I say, although you didn't necessarily say it yourself. You know what I mean? So that's why white people, especially in America, need to stand up and say, we don't support this. We don't believe in this. And it always starts at the top, doesn't it? If the White House, the guy in the White House can also put his foot down and say, this is not what we believe in. This is not what we stand for as a society. I mean, it's so ironic, right, that in America, the American Declaration of Independence, to know the document, the Constitution, it says all men are created equal, and they endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights, among which are the right, freedom, liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The very first sentence of the Declaration of American Independence is founded on the notion that all men are created equal. Ironic that the very person who wrote it down, Washington, he owned slaves at the time when he wrote it. I think it was George Washington. Yeah, he owned slaves, but he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, but your family owns slaves. You know what I mean? So if Americans can live up to the expectation that the Declaration of Independence pronounces, and that's the idea that all men are created equal, they're endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights, among which are life, the very first one, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I think a lot of the unrest would be undone.
Yeah. What do we do as white people, and as a community and as a human race to stop this being, because black people and racism will still be here tomorrow, next month, next year, the year after, but I guarantee you, and I hope to my core this doesn't happen, but I guarantee you the people putting on social media Black Lives Matter, especially the white people, they will not be there next month, next year, posting. How do we make this outcry for equality? How do we make that not just some new social media, some social media fad? How do we make this ingrained in the white community, in the community of the human race, to continuously fight for equal rights between all races?
Man, that's a very difficult one, because it's not just, I always look at those kind of situations in this way. We only jump on the bandwagon that calls the perpetrators out only when there's a case that went public. What about the cases we don't know about? What about the guy that was gunned down and nobody was there to take a video of it? We don't know about those cases. We only get, we only fan the flames when there is an episode where, there's an Ahmed Arbery or there's a George Floyd that was gunned down. You know what I mean? So the thousands more that we don't ever find out about. The guy that was shot, jogging in the road and nobody was there to take a video of it. So there's just so much worse things that are happening and we don't know about. If we knew it all, we'd probably be really appalled as a human race. But now it's not really appalled. It's only appalled. It's not permanent. You know what I mean? People get annoyed just for a few hours or a few days, and then a week later, they're not talking about it anymore because, well, life has to go on, right? Babies are being born, life goes on, and we can't dwell. So it's I always look at America as again as a benchmark, like you said, as a benchmark country that we all look up to and say, well, these guys are meant to be progressive. They're meant to be the leaders in the world. You look at the scar and the collective stain on the American conscience when 9/11 happened. Think about that. You know what I mean? You know what makes it dramatic was the manner in which it was done and the scale and the volume of lives that were lost and the shock and the terror.
Unfortunately, the camera's cut out at the point that you saw, which is disappointing massively, because we went on to talk about race and racism and how we can sort of make the society more equal and harmonious for everyone for another half an hour, 45 minutes. So the fact that that isn't there to put out is disappointing. But regardless, I think the first hour did Anela justice. I want to say a big thank you to Anela for coming on, because not only is he absolutely articulate and eloquent and had some unbelievable experiences, but to be able to go through them and publicly discuss them is fantastic. And I know it's difficult, but it was absolutely educational for me and hopefully for you guys watching too. And for someone as privileged as I am, I'm a man. That in itself is massively privileged, but born in the UK, I'm white. I never truly financially had to worry about things. And so as privileged as I am, all I can do is educate myself, because I don't experience racism firsthand. I don't necessarily see it secondhand because I am so privileged. So the least I can do is just go and educate myself. And so Anela coming on was a big part of sort of that education. And I guess I'd urge everyone watching in a similar position to me or not to just go out and find out and try to understand and try to educate yourself, because again, as I said, that's the least we can do. It is such a prominent issue amongst the world, and I'm almost ashamed that I've never truly spoke up about it before. So I guess there's a start point for everyone, and hopefully this interview can be yours. On the social media posts, I think it's important that everyone sort of doesn't make this a big social media fad. I'm doing this interview now because it's contemporary, but I find it extremely important. But, I've posted on social media, Black Lives Matter, and I've seen everyone else posting on social media, Black Lives Matter, and supporting these movements. But I want to make sure that for myself particularly, and I'd urge you to too, to not make it a thing that you do for a month and then you move on to gender issues and then you move on to your own football stuff, I want to make this something that we continue to work on every single day of our lives, and I understand that that's unrealistic to do so on social media, but it is something that we can definitely achieve in our own personal lives. And as I said, if you're privileged enough to not see racism firsthand in your day-to-day life and therefore are unable to go and take action personally, go out and educate yourself. Go out and speak to people about it and spread the word and spread the message that racism and inequality like that is absolutely unacceptable, and that it isn't enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist, and you have to actively stand up for what's right rather than just let it go. And I know it's a cliche, but white silence rather is violence, and I'm taking it upon myself now to do that, and hopefully you guys will too. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully this video was educational and did help you, inspire you to really take on this message and apply it in your everyday life, because it certainly has done so to me. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next week.